Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week we are watching Season 1, Episode 8, Confidence Man. Going to talk about Sawyer.
Oh, Sawyer. Let's get to it. We were just talking before we were recording, and you didn't like the peanut butter thing?
I don't dislike it, but I don't like it. I find it confusing.
What's confusing about it? It's a sweet gesture.
Is it?
Yes.
Or is it just confusing?
What's confusing about it? She wants peanut butter. He realizes that he can't get it for her, but he still wants to charm her and take her back to the caves. And so he comes in with the invisible peanut butter.
It's sweet. It wouldn't have worked on me. Maybe that's just my lens. But I felt watching it like, oh, this is cheesy, Charlie. Like, that works for you because that's a big part of who you are.
Well, it worked for Claire.
And it worked. No, I just thought it was cheesy.
Okay. Well, to me, it was one of those things that really caught on with Lost fans. Like, it was like a thing with Charlie, the peanut butter moment. I think they reference it later in the show, too. I think it comes up again.
Is it one of Charlie's, like, when he makes that list of the 10 best moments of the...
No, I think that moment was the moment he met Claire.
That was the greatest, but I think there were other Claire moments on that list.
Maybe.
Anyway.
I just was like, oh, it's the peanut butter thing. Like, I'm so happy to see, Charlie and Claire making each other happy again.
Oh, I just cringed.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I think that's a terrible opinion. No offense.
I'm sorry. My dear listeners, if you also think I have a terrible opinion, 9546 Dharma. Let us know.
Oh, gosh.
Speaking of which, we received another hot take this week from Scott in British Columbia. Let's roll.
Hey guys, this is Scott from BC, Canada, just calling in on Confidence Man. First, I want to say that I really like your podcast. It's nice to see a new Lost one come in every once in a while for me to listen to. I really like Confidence Man. It was one of those good character development episodes that Lost got so good at. As you start off thinking that Sawyer is just the jerk that he is, not giving Shannon her drugs back and the letter, and starting to realize that, oh, he is this guy in this letter. And then all of a sudden, as you get into the long con, you start to realize that maybe this isn't him, as when the young boy comes into the room and he stops and cuts the deal, and you can just see the look on his face. And then later on, as Kate reads the letter and sees the sticker on the envelope, you realize, no, it actually isn't. It actually wasn't him. It was him that had happened to. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, well, maybe there's something more to Sawyer. Maybe he's not actually the jerk that he portrays himself to be, which makes you think, well, why? Why does he have to come off as this guy? Is it just because he's been such a jerk for all these years? It's just something he has to portray. But no, it's one of those good Lost character shows, and I just absolutely loved it, and look forward to hearing what you guys think, and thanks for taking my call.
So the thing I really like about this take, Scott, is that, I don't know if you did this intentionally, but it sounded to me like you were describing this whole episode as a long con.
Ooh.
Like, we too, as the viewer, are kind of being conned into believing that, Sawyer is a certain way, and then in fact we find out that, in a way, he is the kid, or he was the kid, and, he still is an asshole, as you say, but, like, he's conning us too. He's not just conning the people around him.
Right, the show is conning us.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, is that dramatic irony where something is happening but the reader doesn't? I don't know.
It's dramatic and it's ironic, so I'll take it.
I forget my types of irony. Anyway.
Scott, thank you for the call. I think we agree with your take on Sawyer, and we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Sammy, do you have a flaming hot take for us on this episode?
Oh gosh, well, I have two hot takes, and one is thoughtful and one is really flaming. Which one do you want?
Flaming.
I'm so uninterested in anything that Boone does. He's just so boring. I mean, I couldn't even... I was a little sympathetic for Shannon with the asthma, but just every scene... Boone, he's just this blank, lifeless look on his face. He's always screwing things up. I don't know. I just don't care about Boone. I'm bored by Boone.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is he's only had, 3 scenes. And he's...
and he still gets on your nerves.
Yeah, gosh. He's trying to do a noble thing, and I get that, but I feel like he is just always used for, a plot device where somebody needs to screw something up and create some conflict, and he always ends up being the creator of said conflict. Oh, Boone.
hopefully he'll build more sympathy by the time of his dramatic death about 10 episodes from now.
Yes, spoiler alert.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the point of the show. We talk about spoilers. Rosie,
Yes.
what's your hot take?
Mine is gentler. Shout out to Sun for knowing her herbal remedies.
Yeah.
Because we have Jack who makes the good point near the beginning of the episode that, like, we're having a lot of scrapes lately. I'm going to be running out of medicine here at some point. Sun knows that eucalyptus apparently can treat breathing disorders. I don't know. I haven't looked this up. Seems to be true.
It's on TV.
So. Yeah, it must be true. But shout out to Sun for finding a creative solution.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the moment where Jack realizes what she's done. He's like, oh, that's a great idea. But Jack didn't think of it. Sun did. So this was a Sawyer episode.
It was.
So we probably ought to talk about Sawyer. Are there any other characters you want to talk about first before we get into the meat of it?
I'd like to talk about Sayid a little bit.
Oh, we always talk about Sayid.
I know.
No, I'm not complaining. He's
we
great.
at the Hatch, Sayid might be our favorite character between the two of us.
I think he is the surprise hero so far this year.
Agreed.
What do you want to say about Sayid?
So what Sayid made me sad in this episode because he does what he thinks is right in the moment, right? He tortures Sawyer, but then he feels like he needs to go on this walk around the island to isolate himself, to go kind of seek redemption, to do his penance. Sayid seems really motivated by a desire for redemption. He just gets so screwed by the ending, and that just upsets me.
You had to bring that up.
When I watch Sayid's episodes now, because he is so noble, and then we know that the end to his story is not through his own fault, but it's not noble.
It's through getting possessed.
Ugh.
Want to talk about Sawyer?
We must.
Okay.
We must.
Oh, God.
So first of all, I want to give a shout out for having the best dialogue on the show. Like there's when he's just finished being tortured and he's still tied to the tree, and somebody comes and asks, I think it's Kate, comes and asks how he's doing, and he says, like, I was just tortured by a spinal surgeon and a genuine
damn
Iraqi.
spinal surgeon.
Yeah.
Genuine.
Like, yeah, whoever
of course
wrote
I'm serious.
his dialogue was just outstanding.
It's amazing. I actually wrote down a bunch of my favorites because I wanted to make sure we did this. I enjoy. I mean, it's kind of perverse to enjoy this, but he's getting tortured, and Sayid is, sticking the bamboo shoots in his nails and everything, and then they stop, and he says, "Don't stop now. I think my sinuses are clear." Oh my God! And Jack says to him, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And I'm thinking the same thing, like, "Yeah, what is wrong with you, dude?"
Oh yeah,
the one-liners,
gallows humor, but it's delivered so well.
Yeah, even when he was, the very politically incorrect. Sayid's torturing. That's all you got. No wonder we kick your ass.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. It's so bad, but it's so good.
Well,
it's
good.
Sawyer. It's Sawyer. I guess I found myself in a weird place watching this episode of being simultaneously repulsed but intrigued by him. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much that's motivated by knowing, that ultimately he turns out to be sympathetic. But really, for the first time watching season 1, I felt like, okay, he's clearly as big a douchebag as he's been, this whole time. Mm-hmm. But I'm also just, I don't know, I kind of want to care about him.
Yeah, and I think we get that entirely through the backstory. He is being so obtuse about this inhaler thing, and then it turns out he doesn't even have it. Mm-hmm. Kate is right in her assessment, I think, that he wants to be hated, and he wants...
Yeah, maybe even wants to be tortured.
To be a pariah, yeah, and we don't get to feel sympathetic for that until the end of the episode when we find out that, his family was victimized by a con man, and then he grew up to do the same thing.
I'd forgotten how good that twist was, by the way. That you think that it's, that the letter was to him, but he wrote it so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so they do build up. I did feel myself hating Sawyer as the episode went on, and Sawyer's one of my favorite characters in the end. But they build up so much resentment until the end when you have to step back and say to yourself, "Oh shoot, whoa."
So here's my big question, in terms of what's going through Kate's head this episode, because I feel kind of weird suggesting this, but it kind of feels watching this as big as an asshole as he's being, and it's so creepy, the kiss me thing. I mean, it's really it's kind of Predator creepy.
Oh yeah, 100%, yeah.
But I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to watch Kate and how she acts in this episode and not think that there's a part of her that's still not kind of intrigued by him.
I think they both realize that they have more in common. than a lot of the people on this island. I think
right.
there is a commonality between them in that Sawyer knows Kate is not scared of him. I think we see that in the opening scene when she's walking on the beach and he comes out of the ocean. Like, she's not perturbed, she's not flustered, she's just rolling her eyes. Yeah, exactly. And everyone else is threatened by Sawyer. And Kate is not. And she knows that she can negotiate with him, right? Like, she's the one who goes to talk to him before he brings up the kiss. And Jack just punches him. You know, nobody else even tries. Right. But Kate is able to communicate with Sawyer in a way that nobody else is. And I think that's because they do end up having a lot in common.
The scene that really stood out to me and was the scene where Kate reads the letter.
Yeah.
And then there's that really long pause and Sawyer says, "So how about that kiss?" And it's like 10 seconds of silence and Kate's eyes are just closed the whole time. And he says, "Didn't think so."
Yeah.
But you're right. Now that I think about it, it does kind of seem like that's a moment where, even though things are horrible between them, they definitely understand each other.
They recognize each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hindsight. Was anything different for you in hindsight watching this episode?
Yes.
Okay.
Why does John Locke lie? Why does he set Sawyer up?
Because he was the one who knocked out Sayid.
Yeah, well, yes, obviously. But he could have just said, "I don't know, man, I was skinning a boar." Why does he point the finger at Sawyer? And in theory, jumpstart all of the conflict in this episode.
Good question.
Like, thus far, John has been super conflict averse, super independent, not interested in the politics of the group. But in this, he's instigating. He knows Sayid's going to go after him.
Right, and he knows Sawyer is innocent.
Yeah, because he knows he did it.
I guess I kind of just read that as Locke being a really shitty liar and just feeling like he had to come up with, point the finger at someone else to make sure it doesn't get pointed at him. But now that you mention it, that doesn't really hold up.
No, I don't. I don't think he's a bad liar, and B, I don't think anyone would question him, even if he was, because he has been so steadfast. He's given nobody a reason to doubt him. They may think he's weird, but they don't think he's insincere in any way.
Do you think Locke could just see Sawyer as dangerous?
Well, I think if that's true, if Locke does think Sawyer's dangerous, I don't think he would send Sayid after him.
Right. Locke would just deal with it.
He would handle it himself. Either he would go to talk to him and try to redeem him, or...
It's so strange to think that Sawyer becomes, lovable by the end.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked about Sawyer a little bit, you want to go to Javier Grillo-Marxuach?
Absolutely, I do.
So we have this essay that was sent to us by Javier Grillo-Marxuach, who was a writer and one of the producers on the first 2 seasons of the show, The Lost Will and Times of Javier Grillo-Marxuach. Lots of great stories about how Lost gets made, and we're going to read some of it.
Yeah, so this week I want to bring up my favorite thing, my favorite revelation from this essay. Nobody sat down and planned this whole universe out. Like, how when people talk about Harry Potter, they talk about J.K. Rowling, sitting down and mapping out the series and, figuring out exactly how all the magic was going to work, before it even started. The writers of Lost apparently did not do that. Their modus operandi apparently was basically they would decide they wanted to do something, some plot device or some character, and then just have a working explanation, which would remain the working explanation until someone came up with a better one.
Which just sounds like a really fun work environment,
by the way. Yeah,
so
it's stressful, but fun.
Some great stories in here about how they're all sitting around and arguing whether they can come up with something cooler than what they've already got. So let's
so the Hatch is a great example of this. Let's see. We kept pitching possibilities for the Hatch, but nothing we threw out ever overrode Damon's concern, being Damon Lindelof, that if we shat the bed on the reveal, the audience would depart in droves. The Hatch was pitched as a gateway to a frozen polar bear habitat. the mouth of a cave full of treasure that would so entrance the castaways with dreams of avarice that Jack would ultimately be forced to seal it shut with dynamite.
Which, of course, is what Jack would do.
Jack, stop. Have, like, one, like, human flaw. The door to a biodome whose inhabitants could only breathe carbon dioxide. This is actually similar to a very famous plot on Star Trek, where they arrive at a planet where the life forms are all based on silicone instead of carbon, and they have to figure out how to interact with them, and it's very interesting.
Of course, I was having a climate change thought where if we were in a world where everything wanted more carbon dioxide, that would be great.
That would actually, not be the worst adaptation.
But anyway.
Let's see.
And even a threshold to an Atlantis-style lost civilization.
Yes.
That was their other idea.
Could kind of get behind that. And then he goes on to say, I believe that my idea was that it led into the conning tower of a nuclear submarine that had run aground and been buried in an epic mudslide. As we trudged through the first half of season 1, Damon rushed into the writer's room one day with an uncharacteristic bounce in his step and declared that, quote, inside the hatch there's a room with a guy in it, and if he doesn't press a button every 108 minutes, the world will end.
Which is just amazing that he just came up with that, like, on the spot. Like, I've got it! 108 minutes, world will end.
Can you imagine? Like, I feel like that's, like, just an improv exercise.
But
like,
with much higher stakes.
Well, yeah, and if we were reading this and the idea they'd gone with was, the nuclear submarine that had run aground, we would have read that and said, like, what the hell is that?
Oh, you mean the 108 minutes?
Yeah, because it sounds bonkers.
It does, and you're right, you have to see it, but Damon knew. He somehow knew that was the one. It wasn't the nuclear sub, it wasn't the Atlantis lost civilization, or the carbon dioxide world. It was the 108 minutes. And it's intriguing. The thing that jumped out at me is that number, right? 108. Is it like, how do you even come up with that? I was kind of thinking like maybe it's like short enough that it's gonna fuck up Desmond's life, but long enough that it's not totally impossible. But like
that you can still leave and like do other, like go to the bathroom and get food
and okay. So go back to the essay here. So Walt was another super cool one.
This I'm gonna choose to believe that this is actually the case.
So basically, they were talking here about how. So there was also a very strong drive from Damon and J.J. Abrams to advance the story that Walt was a powerful psychic. This explained, for instance, the bird hitting the window in the episode special. Walt as psychic would also help us explain why the others had such an interest in Walt and would ultimately kidnap him. But then they go on and basically say here that the powers that be at the network who were, totally terrified of mystics and science fiction genre.
Well, and also of, like, backing themselves into a genre corner.
Right. It says they were resolutely opposed to the science fictional idea of a psychic boy who could manifest polar bears on a tropical island through the strength of will alone. Damon and JJ nevertheless gave themselves a back door into this area by putting the polar bear in the comic book. Which was such a thing that people were always posting screenshots of, like, look, it's the comic book.
There it is. It's the answer.
Yeah.
And later he goes on, when they're talking about special, the execution of the episode apparently left plenty of wiggle room to give us plausible deniability, even as Damon would regularly come into the writer's room, throw up his arms, and declare, of course Walt's psychic.
Well, of course Walt's psychic.
I kind of, like, of course Walt's psychic. That makes so much more sense than the, like, total lack of explanation that Walt
it really
gets.
does. Oh, my God.
Like, I'm going to choose to believe that that's true and that's canon, and I guess it is because it came from the writers, but, like, that explanation is so much better and makes... like, redeems the very strange Walt plotline so much for me.
Because you're waiting, like, after the end of season 2 where Michael gets him back from the others, you're waiting, like, every year. It's like, okay, when are they going to explain Walt? When are they going to explain Walt?
And they never do.
They never do. Did you watch the season 6 DVD extra scene with Walt?
No.
Okay. So I remember this being, like, something I was super excited about. When they released the season 6 DVD, they put a special, like, it was like a 13 or 15 minute, like, mini episode on it. Where Ben, and this takes place like after the end of the show, and there are 2 scenes in it, and one involves Ben going to this like Dharma station that is somehow still operating somewhere in the real world where they're it's where they're sending the pallet drops to the island. Remember the pallet drop?
Yeah.
So they finally like kind of explain that, and Ben is like, hey guys, like someone should have told you 15 years ago you can stop sending these pallet drops now.
Yeah, everyone's dead.
Which is super awkward for those poor guys who've been doing it for all these years. But then the second half of it is Hurley, and I think Ben also goes to this place where Walt is living, and I think he's in some kind of psychic facility even, where he's having some kind of not psychic facility,
like a psych ward,
like a psych ward even. It's something where it's oh geez, Walt is not in a good place, and Hurley says, I'm here to take you out of here, and Walt says why, and Hurley says because you're special. And so it's implied that there is some reason for Walt to come back to the island, and that he does have some ability. So it doesn't really explain it still, but yes, I agree with Damon. Of course Walt is psychic.
Of course Walt's psychic. And it's funny to me that they were so averse to sci-fi, because I think we've said this before, the whole damn show hinges on time travel.
Right.
They get so deeply into sci-fi in a couple of seasons that I don't know. I guess they decided that didn't matter anymore.
Well, I think by the time the show got so popular, Damon, because I think Damon and Carlton, they hit it long enough, and then when they were getting 20 million viewers a week, it's okay, now we can do whatever we want, and you can't stop us.
These people can handle the flash forward. Yeah,
love the flash forwards.
We have
I shouldn't whisper. We're
years of podcasting to do before we talk about the flash forwards. So the very last thing that is relevant to this point is the struggle for the writers to come up with a past for Hurley, beloved Hurley. Javier writes, for most of season 1, none of us could create a past that fit the tremendous charm that Jorge Garcia brought to the role of Hurley. For a long time, we had the idea that Hurley's real secret was that because he was such an amiable sort, he was the world's most successful repo man and had been in Australia to repo a wayward tech millionaire's yacht. Hurley's, quote, mutant ability, end quote, in this version of the story was that through his unassuming, best friend of the world demeanor, he could talk anyone out of anything. Needless to say, no one could make that story work, and we really tried. That's... I feel like they could have made that story work.
I mean, so?
That to me is not significantly crazier than Hurley winning the lottery and coming to believe he is cursed.
I just think that would have been so depressing.
What?
I don't know, Hurley is a repo man, taking stuff away from people.
Yeah, but he's such a pleasant repo man.
I know.
And how would that be less depressing than Hurley coming to believe he's cursed? And his house burning down.
Money.
Well, yeah.
You're right. That's
because Hurley's story is pretty sad anyway. With all of the things that happened to him.
You're right. Maybe he's just happy, so happy-go-lucky that he sells it. You're right. Maybe he would have sold Repo Man. I don't know.
I like that alternative. I like Hurley's story anyway. I'm totally content with it. But
it's interesting that they had his character through most of season 1 and still didn't really know what they were going to do with him.
Well, because we don't get... When do we get the first Hurley episode?
I think it's episode 18.
It's pretty late, yeah.
It's right near the end.
And I think we only get one Hurley episode in season 1.
Yeah. I know that some of you guys, by the way, are probably listening to this and thinking see, I knew it all along. They didn't plan anything. They didn't know what they were doing. And I have 2 responses to that, and one is, it's been 7 years, get over it. And you're probably thinking I shouldn't be rude to listeners. I'm sorry.
I don't care.
I shouldn't do that. But my real response is I think this is super cool. This is the creative process. To me, it's fascinating to think about how they were, all together one-upping themselves. And I so much respect that out of that, come up with an explanation that can beat it process came... such a great show that ultimately worked on most levels. I think it's awesome.
Oh yeah, I love these behind the scenes peeks. But we will probably return to this at a later date.
Yeah, we've got some pretty cool interviews coming up the next few weeks. Next week you're going to hear our conversation with Andrea Gabriel, who played Nadia Jassim, Sayid's love interest from Iraq. And the week after that, actually for the 2 weeks after that, we've got a really great interview with William Maypother, who is Ethan Rom, everyone's favorite terrifying other, who is much kinder in real life.
That is it for us. We've been delighted to include your hot takes in the last few episodes of the show. Keep them coming.
9546 Dharma.
Yes, you can dial us that way. Our hot take this week came in the form of a message to our Facebook page if you're out of the country and don't want to incur those charges, or if you just don't like calling phones.
Which is a thing that people don't like.
That's another way to get the audio to us.
Please rate and review us on iTunes or on Stitcher, wherever you're getting the podcast.
We are on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast, Facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
And thanks for listening.
Namaste.